Hello, is that the Fetch?
It is indeed the Fetch.
Welcome to Revolution Radio. First time I welcomed you since I was just telling the audience you brought me on in January the first time, and now I'm a regular.
Well, it's great to be back, man. Have I ever been on your show yet? I think we were on one time when you just started. I think we visited you just when you started, and then
we did our first videos about a year and a half ago as well.
And YouTube promptly blocked them along with the rest of you, man. They blocked all of you at the end of the day.
Another strike last night.
I don't know how you do it.
Wow. Yeah, so we should tell the audience you're on Inside the Eye Live on Saturdays on Revolution Radio, right? Is that at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time?
You know, there's two shows. Yeah, 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern, 10 to 1 o'clock p.m. That's Inside the Eye Live, intelligent media for the politically aware. And then we have Inside the Eye Live prime time every Thursday at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern to 8 o'clock p.m. right here on Revolution Radio on Studio A. So, yes, we got the two shows, and we're just plugging right along, just as everybody else, I think, right now.
Very good. And your website is Inside the Eye?
InsideTheEyeLive.com. That's InsideTheEyeLive.com. And, of course, you can pick up all the information about the show and the past shows and guests, and it's pretty much dedicated just to Inside the Eye Live. There's a few feature articles put up from time to time, but for the most part, it's just the current ongoings of what's going on with Inside the Eye Live.
Okay, very good. So we've identified you, and today we're going to talk about the Isisian codes and the Hermetic Qaballa. And for the video audience, you've got a screen on behind you. You've got a green screen. You're in Jordan, right?
Yeah, I am in Jordan. It's 1:13 in the morning. I don't know if that's esoterically significant, but it's 1:13 in the morning. It's warm
thank
here.
Thank you for staying up for me, Dennis. Thank you for being my guest.
Well, more than
3 in the morning, my gosh.
Come on, I'm on vacation. More than welcome.
Great to have you so late at night. I'm sure your mind will be sharp. You're a night owl, so you'll be fine.
That's probably true. I'm probably just waking up.
Yeah. So he looks like some astrological symbols there. I guess we can tell the radio audience as much as you can.
Well, you know, this is actually what's behind me here is very complex. It's what we call the Garden of Eden. It's the actual metaphysical matrix that goes into the mythology of the Garden of Eden. It's how the Garden of Eden is portrayed in astrological symbols. It's basically the two lobes of the brain, how the various astrological symbols work within each other, how the paths work. So when you hear a lot about Kabbalah, they talk about the 32 paths or the 22 paths or the whatever the case may be. This is basically the matrix behind it. So when you listen or you read your Torah or your Old Testament, it talks about how Adam and Eve were thrown out of the Garden of Eden, and the cherub and the flaming sword guard the Garden of Eden. They're also talking about a particular diamond or a stone, and that front face of the stone, if you were to peel it apart or peel it away, becomes the Jewish tree of life. And then what remains behind is what you're seeing behind me. And that, of course, then is the Garden of Eden. So the goal here from the esoteric world relative to that discipline would be to use the tree to get behind the tree of life so that you could return back to the Garden of Eden. But however, the Kabbalists, as they're doing it now, are actually doing it all quite wrong. They've put the channel is actually through Tipherah, which is the number 6, and they're all trying to go through Kether, which is number 1, and they've actually got the thing reversed. They've screwed the whole system up. And because of that, we've got a lot of whacked out people that follow this type of religion, this type of ideology, this type of philosophy. It's because they've inverted the pathways, they've inverted the channels. So instead of doing something positive and good, we end up with a culture of pretty much psychopaths who do everything in inverse. You know, they see evil as being good and harming people as being good. And of course, you and I both know, and most of the world agrees that this is not the way to go. That's just not what it's all about.
You're talking about like Jewish culture, right?
Yeah, exactly. Their Kabbalah is corrupted. They're doing things actually backwards. They're doing it in inverse. You know, when you look at the
word for the audience, if they're new to the Kabbalah, how would you define the Kabbalah? Would you call it Jewish mysticism?
No, not at all. Because Kabbalah came and preceded pretty much everybody. I mean, when you look at going back to Kratalis, which is long before Jewish. I mean, Jewish Gematria, Jewish Kabbalah is actually a very late comer to the scene. It doesn't come until after the Greek Kabbalah and the Greek system. So whatever the Jewish people say, they know they're late to the scene, but they try to say, oh, we have this oral tradition. Now, come on, guys. When you look back to our traditions, Western traditions, you can go all the way back to Kratalis. And in Kratalis, we have a story between, I think, what's the guy's name? Hermogenes and Socrates. And Socrates is saying the same thing, like, then teacher, when somebody gives us a name, he uses the work of the legislator. And Hermogenes says, yeah, I agree. And Hermogenes says, Socrates says, and is every man a legislator, or only the skilled only? And Hermogenes says, it's the skilled only. And then Socrates says, and Hermogenes, not every man is able to give a name, but only a maker of names. And this is the legislator, who of all the skilled artisans in the world is the rarest. So all the way back into the Greek philosophy, we have this very long storied tradition about those who are capable and able of naming the names upon which this world is crafted are the most skilled artisans of all, because it is in and of itself an esoteric metaphysical craft. Now, as we get down into the profane, imagine the amount of time and effort parents will put into naming their children. They will spend hours and days and months and reference and pore over books and meanings and all this to get to a name. Well, imagine now taking a virgin earth where you've got a new human creation and nothing is named, and you need to create everything by name. Everything has to eventually be named. You have a name for everything. Table, chair, computer, mouse, you name it. Everything gets named. And imagine a virgin earth with no names whatsoever. And then you get this idea, this deep metaphysical idea of how the world came to be named as it's named. And then the channels that take you back to how it got named and the essence of the name, and all of this basically, if you and then of course it is cast forward, Brian, into the future, and that would be something like Lurianic Kabbalah, the idea within Lurianic Kabbalah, which is a Jewish Kabbalah going back, I think, to the 1600s, and it's the idea that if you follow the name back, you will get to the source of deity from which the name came. And that's a lot what goes on inside of the idea of philosophy and inquiry, philosophical inquiry into the names that everything has on this planet. And that's just one facet of Kabbalah. That's the facet that I've gone and probably become a reasonable master at. But I do not engage myself in another type of Kabbalah, which is operative, which is where you have Hollywood, you have the darker worlds where they are really conjuring up demons. They are allowing demons to possess themselves. Some people call this alien, but some people call it demonic. It's transdimensional. That part of the Kabbalah I avoid with a passion, because basically, for me, this is a very dark world and I don't want to be involved. You know, some of the great masters of this, for instance, Aleister Crowley. If you look at Crowley's number, his name, and you take Crowley and you remove the Y and you sum each of those letters, well, what it comes out to is 666. So that Y acts as a hinge, which then spins that name around. But he says, I'm the beast. Well, yeah, actually his number did come out to a 666. But anyways, Brian, that's kind of what Kabbalah is. It's finding the essence and the philosophy within the names, trying to break down the names so that we kind of remove some of the delusion. And some of our mythologies tell us how to break these names down, how to decipher the words, how to fix, not to fix, but how to focus on a word, and then, you know, how to decipher it. I mean, it is an art form. It's not something everybody can do. But that's kind of what I do. That's kind of what made me famous on the web long before I got into the political world. I was delving very deeply into this.
How long have you been into Kabbalah?
I've been focusing Kabbalah since not focusing, but I was trained somewhat in the occult going back to 1982. Right out of high school, I learned how to do the tarot cards and psychometry, which is like reading the images coming, really images. It's electromagnetic pulses as I look at it scientifically. So if you have some gold, that person leaves an electromagnetic memory inside of that gold. And of course, if you have the right antennas, you can pick up that frequency and then you can analyze what's coming out of off the gold. It's kind of one of the reasons why you never buy gold. You don't go to a pawn shop and buy gold. You may be buying something with some really terrible negative energy in it, and you would never even know it. You might have things going wrong with you, but you would never know it. So, and oftentimes be careful. I mean, there are dark people out there. So for instance, we had somebody here, we know she practices a form of witchcraft from the Philippines, and she gave a cross to somebody. But we know she's not a nice person. And within a day or two, this guy started to get heavy chest pains, deep breathing problems. And they told him, where did you take the cross from? They told him where. They made him take the cross off. And they burned it and then buried it so that nobody could get access to it. So this type of world, it does exist. I mean, it's not something I delve in as a political show on Inside the Eye Live, but it is something that obviously is part of the world, and we're not ignorant of it, to say the least. We just don't focus on it on the show. But nonetheless, as you know, or some other listeners know, we do blend from time to time some of these esoteric ideas into the show, and that's kind of what makes the show unique and why it's so well liked.
Part of our interest, where it relates to Jewish power in the world, is the Jews might be using higher realm or black magic against the Gentiles.
Well, they are. Yeah, I think they are. I mean, personally, when they start crafting these spells and throwing subliminal messages into movies, that's dark. I mean, you're trying to control people's minds. And once again, that is not something we feel that you should do, but it's something they have no qualms in doing. So it's part of the battle we have to wage.
Yeah, it's part of the battle. It's good to know these things. So it's really good to have this subject on the show. I'm really interested in this, Very good.
Well, I've been doing it a long time, quite honestly, I haven't done a show on this, I think, since we did yours on the operative Kabbalah. But today, I thought what might be fun, Brian, we've discussed a little bit before the show, is talk about the Isisian codes and Hermetic Qaballa and what this might be. And one of the things about the Isisian codes, and it's very funny how what happens a lot is, if you look at the ancient world, the ancient gods are very well protected within our language system. One of the most powerful, perhaps, is Mercury, where we get the idea of merchants and mercantilism and things of this nature. Thoth becomes thought. So, I mean, I should make a list, but if we were to go through and look at all the various words, you will find that the Greek gods, the ancient gods, are very well embedded into the English language. And so a lot of these gods often find themselves being attacked and destroyed, the name's destroyed. Now, one of the most loved goddesses of all was known as Isis, and we know now how much that name has been sullied over. But Isis was always a code for speech. Now, there's something, Brian, known as gematria. And gematria is simply the idea. This is the simple way. The idea of gematria, which is, again, it's Greek. It comes from the Greek, and then the Hebrew, the rabbis took it from the Greeks, but the word is Greek. Gematria is Greek. And gematria is this idea that when you're trying to track back the essence of these names, that a particular word that has the exact same numerical value has an esoteric significance tied or linked to it. So therefore, a word like cherub, like the flaming sword and the cherub, that cherub has a value of 57. And the word dreidel, which is what the Jewish kids play during Hanukkah, that also has a value of 57. So now we're able to use gematria and say, okay, if this is an esoterically crafted gematria, then we should be able to link the cherub to the dreidel. And now, since we know that the cherub is guarding the way to the Garden of Eden, and we know that the upper portion of the Jewish tree of life is basically designed around a cube, well, then you start to get the idea that this is kind of how it is all starting to play out. Brian, there you are, Brian. We lost you for a second there. So basically, that's gematria. That's one of the things within the Hermetic Qaballa. Another idea is we go back to what's known as the Book of Formation, or the Sepher Yetzira. And in the Sepher Yetzira, they talk about these 22 sounds. Now, and from everything is made, the world is made off of these 22 sounds. Well, the reality is that every language, technically, theoretically, would have its own Kabbalah, its own way of naming things. Theoretically, because it's not just us, but in the Western traditions, we've been very focused on the names. We've been very crafty. We've constructed these languages. We've designed esoteric codes directly into these words. But when we look at the very basic building blocks of language, this becomes then the study of linguistics. So they talk about the sounds, and when you read the Sepher Yetzira, they talk about how these sounds are formed by the voice, impressed on the air, audibly modified in 5 places, which would be the throat, the mouth, the tongue, through the teeth, and by the lips. Well, okay, this is all going back to, say, 1900 AD. Now, we believe it is actually taken from the Pythagorean schools. But when you read this, this is nothing more or nothing less than a linguistic idea put into the language. This is linguistics, how the sounds start to come out of your mouth. So now we've got an esoteric Kabbalistic document known as the Sepher Yetzira, or the Book of Formation, talking in linguistics. And they talk about how these 2 sounds of each letter are the hard and the soft, the aspirated and the softened. And they are called double because each letter represents a contrast or a permutation. Thus, life and death, peace and war, wisdom and folly, riches and poverty, grace and indignation, fertility and solitude, power and servitude, and on it goes. In other words, what is being said here is that it's not just words that have esoteric significances. They're telling us that essentially within the actual phonetics of the language, there are esoteric significances. So therefore, each building block or the phoneme has an esoteric significance. And then that esoteric significance carries with it a series of permutations. Now, if you understood how the tarot cards work, well, okay, a tarot card, depending on where it's placed, forward, backward, sideways, the seeker, there's an infinite number of permutations basically that you can get from one tarot card. The same now they're saying is being applied to language itself, to the sounds of the human system itself. Now we know that there was something very critical about speech, because if we go back to the Popol Vuh, which is purportedly, because no one really knows, it was the Mayan creation stories. And there were a couple creations and they didn't quite work out right. And what they finally got right was that the human was able to speak. Speech was the key to the creation. Then we have the biblical stories of the Tower of Babel, in which, again, it's the speech that is playing a critical role in the story here. So we know that speech has this critical value within the entire frame or the matrix. Now, if we're going to take this back into further metaphysical history, and that would be like Freemasonic mystery, and I don't remember the guy's name, but he was fairly out there back in 1910, 12, 17. And he was writing books that said essentially in Lemur, if you remember Lemur, I think it was called Lemur in the South Pacific, the first creation of man. The people lived in trees and they could speak but they spoke telepathically. They didn't need to speak. And as they become fallen down from this existence, they became more and more enmeshed in matter, and that cut off the ability to be so well versed, I guess you could say, in telepathy. And then that necessitated the need for the gods to create mankind with the ability to speak. And then once that creation came, then it became necessary to have your legislators who would go out and name things. He would then become the pioneers of the 1700s, who literally, part of this whole thing you should not preclude, was to send men and women, but largely men, out skilled in the business of naming of names, so that the entire planet would be under the dominion of the English language, completely crafted by a very well-tuned and trained elite, really practiced in the naming of names.
You mean like coming to America and naming Plymouth Rock and naming
Correct.
things like that?
Correct. Like the Mississippi, right in the middle, and they say this is Indian. They'll say it's Indian, but of course, the ISIS is pi, and there's a few other things. If you look at Nevada is the 36th state, and if you spin it really quick, and there's something known as the two-headed eagle, the two-headed eagle, and let me digress a little bit, but the two-headed eagle, because when we go back to the Sepher Yetzira, we are told that words are spun as if on a sphere. So we have the sphere that goes right and it goes left, and then the letters could be spun this way and that way. So when we look at this at a very pragmatic Kabbalistic construction, we really are just talking about the left and the right languages. Because if I go from left to right, which is English, the sphere is going to be like in front of me, but if I were to spin the sphere around, it would be like going from right to left, which would then be the Arabic, some of these other languages. So our systems are based on this idea of left to right and right to left. And of course, when we talk about right, we're saying this is right, it's proper. And this is this is part of the philosophy or the philosophizing that you can play with words. Because when we look at the Garden of Eden, the idea is always to return to the Garden of Eden. That's kind of like an ingrained archetype in Western man, the return to the garden. I think there was a 60s song. So we got to get ourselves back to the garden, I don't know if you remember that song, but remember that song? That was a very popular song. But the period, the dot, is like the garden. When we craft a sentence, each of these components, from the capital letter to the grammar, everything has got an esoteric inference or esoteric significance to it. The point here is that sentence, the completion of the sentence, is like returning to the Garden of Eden. So therefore, we are going to go from left to right, because we want to return to the Garden of Eden. And when we look at this from an idea of Jewish metaphysics, we just kind of like look at them. It's like, dudes, you're going from right to left. You're leaving the Garden of Eden, and you're making that your stop point. It's a philosophy embedded into the language that tells us who is doing right and who is not doing right. Right is right, but right shares a direction, as well as righting, which is right. So we can play with the philosophy. We can philosophize about how the words are working and start to say, okay, this Jewish, we know that we need to return to the Garden of Eden. That's philosophy. To go to the Garden of Eden, we've got to return to it. Well, if you leave the Garden of Eden, that is a past tense of left. So therefore, theoretically, hypothetically, when they write this way, they're going away from the Garden of Eden, if you follow the logic, while the Western right to left is going from the leaving of the Garden of Eden to the Garden of Eden. And what's very interesting is these languages, when they go and write their letters, they will write backwards, but they will always do the numbers the same as we do in the West. Not many people know that. They don't write.
They write the left.
They write the numbers left to right, and then the rest of the language goes left to right, or right to left. Odd. Yeah, that is odd, of course, because they can't remove themselves entirely. Okay, they
Oh,
can't, you know, otherwise it just doesn't make any sense. It becomes whacked out. So they got to keep some semblance, at least within number, is my theory. I've actually have studied it, but that's what I'm thinking here. So that's some of the ideas to just kind of get you guys a foundation here. We're talking about a virgin time when we had to create the language, we had to name the names. We have a philosophical or Kabbalistic treatise that's talking about how even the phonetics themselves, the phonemes of the language, the hard and the soft, the aspirated and the unaspirated. To those of you who don't know what an aspirated or unaspirated is, the aspirated has a vibration and the unaspirated does not. So when we look at making a past tense, Greg, inside of our language, we will say destroyed, and that's a D, that's aspirated. But if we say crushed, that's a hard T. That's the model of hardness and softness that they're talking about in this linguistic, pseudo-linguistic treatise called the Sepher Yetzira, or the Book of Formation. So when I look at the language and I say, look, if I go from left to, forget the left to right for now, but if I go and I say destroyed, okay, that's aspirated. If I say crushed, it's unaspirated. Now, if I were to ask people out there in the audience today, where are your aspirated sounds? Could you tell me right now? Could you do it? Well, you should be able to, Greg, because or Brian, because here's why. Yeah. They're located at the threes. They're located at the threes. They're mathematically placed for you. The C, let me try to pull up something here real quickly for you, just so I can show you here. The C, let me see, where is this thing? Yeah, see here. The C.
Yeah.
Hold on here. We kind of, I didn't label these things. That's my fault. Okay, this 3 here, the C is unaspirated. So if I have anything that ends in a C, like cracked, it's going to be a hard C or a hard T. The F, again, 3 more. ABC is 3. DEF is 3. So if I have an F, knived, or what? That not knived. That's a V. What's another F? Give me an F. Cliff. That's not that. Give me an F sound of something that ends in F. Spiffed. Spiffed. Okay, to spiff. Spiffed. Spiff it up. It's been spiffed. Anything that ends in an F is going to be a hard. Then we go 3 in from the last half of the alphabet, which would then be a K, which is like a C. And then on the other side, again, it's 3. P, S, and then X. Those are your unaspirated. They're not random.
Aspirated sound like destroyed.
Would be that's aspirated because it's got a vibration in your throat.
Oh.
Where if I say crushed, there's no vibration in my throat. That's unaspirated.
Oh, crushed.
Now the point here is that the English language isn't random by any stretch of the imagination. And a lot of people think, oh, the alphabet, it's a random thing. No, it is not even close to random. All of your aspirated, unaspirated sounds are 3, 3, and then 3 from the end of the first half of the alphabet. And on the second half of the alphabet, it's again 3, 3, and then 3 from the end. And then, of course, the SH sound or the CH sound, like crunched, would also share this aspirated. So the point here is that, look, the first idea is, one, there is a metaphysical logic and reasoning behind the names. Obviously, this becomes even very important when you get into the politics and the world at large, because they're not going to tell you, hey, they killed that guy today. They'll say he was collateral damage today. You're not going to see things. They're always going to hit us with words like, if I forget, I use them all the time on the show on Saturday, but pernicious, that's a pernicious thought. It's very angry when they say that. It's got a very angry tone to it. So we can formulate words, make them soft sounding, hard sounding. Killed sounds really hard, but bed sounds pretty nice, right? It sounds nice, right? So the point here is that there is an esoteric science behind the sounds. And if you've been given like information how to do it, which I have not personally been, but I'm sure it exists out there, and you know how to combine the words and and utter the words and intone and add mesmer with your hands, you're going to be able to be very effective in moving and holding and mesmerizing the people that you're speaking to. So
Wow.
first thing is, again, we've got a planned creation to the language. We have philosophical treatises that tell us that there is a code or some type of values placed to the phonemes, the actual sounds of the language. We can then look at the language as a mathematical formula or creation and see that it is not random. For instance, if you guys have the screen here, you can see that the C and the S are the same frickin' place, man. They're both at number 3. The D's and the T's are both located at number 4. The dit and the t. Now N's also, because the D, the T, and the N and the L, dit and L, those are our 4 dentals in the language. The D is located at 4. The T is located at number 4. The N is located at 14, which is also the sum of 1 to 4, which is 10. And so you start to see it's not random again. These things are placed in very specific places, specifically for meaning. We know that, like, now we can start to surmise that a number 4 is like a past tense. It's something of the material realm. It's not spiritual, like the spy and the S and the pi and the spiritual type thing. We can start to surmise this. And one of the most unique words that tells you it's a past tense is the word garden. Because if something, remember, we can say hearken is past tense. To hearken, it's kind of like a past tense. It's already happened.
Garden is not past tense, right?
Garden is past tense, because if a garden is sitting there, right, and it's been grown, is it wild? No, no, a garden is not wild. So therefore, that garden,
that's present tense, right?
Yeah, a garden, to garden is one. But if we look at the word garden as a thing, it's also a past tense. Because it's telling us very clearly, because we know that we can supplant or change N's to T's to D's because they're interchangeable. So if a garden is made and it's sitting there, usually it's behind a picket fence. You just change the N to a D and it's guarded. It is guarded. Those plants are guarded. They're not just sitting there open to the elements. They're guarded. It's called a garden, but it's hiding an esoteric philosophic within it, that once you start to grasp how it works, you can then build upon this and create, you can expand upon this type of mentality and go into further esoteric deconstructions of the language.
Okay, interesting. Wow.
I have another one here.
I came up with this. Like you're saying, you could trace it back to God. If you trace the meaning of it, who named it back to God, I like that idea.
Yeah, so here's an example of the two-headed eagle. You know, when we look at the letters, okay, we're going to start building on our alphabet. So we go to A, to B, to C, to D. The B is 2. It's located at number 2. The sum of 1 to 2 is 3. It's comprised of the 1 and the 3. The glyph itself is a 1 and a 3. It creates B. Then when we go to D, it's 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 10. It is then therefore comprised of the 1 and the 0. Now, the ancient Egyptians used the D sound, or the T sound, I should say, as the D as it showed up over the horizon, the sun coming up on the horizon. So some words, like we show with the two-headed eagle, you got to look at the word from the right to the left to the right, and from the center out. We have to look back and forth. We just can't assume a single unidirectional analysis of the word. So when we look at the word horizon, we know that H is symbolic of the Greek letter pi. The O-R-I-Z of the word horizon, if we spin it backwards, like in the Sepher Yetzira, it becomes Z-I-R-O. Well, what is Z-I-R-O but the word zero? And then the
zero,
and then the O-N, of course, is also our English word for one. So the horizon is a word that tells us that pi is composed of the 0 and the 1, and it only has significance when the sun becomes this fourth dimension is now coming up through time. This is just one example of how an esoteric is encoded into the language using Sepher Yetzira, phonetics, the double-headed eagle, reading words from left to right, right to left, and then breaking it down to say, okay, what exactly is meant
here?
How
does the sun work? And you said the sun comes through time. How do you explain that?
Well, that's part of the seven metamerical dimensions of Taoism and a few others. I think we had in the West our own systems, but at the point, the line, the plane, time, spirit, mind, and divinity, something like that. It's a Taoist metaphysical. So the fourth dimension is known as time. And you don't have time till you have basically a thing to start to count it by, and that would be basically a sun. And I'm not an expert on Taoist metanumerics, so I really can't speak too much about that. However, we actually have that, and I've seen it. Jewish people, they have their own version of it. You know, they've co-opted a lot of stuff, and they've created a fairly extensive philosophy. My just point is that if you guys, they just got it wrong. They're really interpreting everything wrong. Another interesting, you got to know the players, Brian. Who are the players in the great mystery? Who are the players? Essentially, there's only three main ones. I mean, there's the three main ones are Osiris, Seth, Jehovah, Typhon, Seth, and Isis. Those are your three main players in the Western system. They're the main foundation of the building blocks. So when you look at Seth, I don't have a picture for you guys, but Seth is one of these creatures with a super long nose. Okay? A super long nose. Seth is always known as the donkey, the ass, the stubborn one. This has always been recognized as the God of the Jews. Jesus appears riding on an ass and things like that. The point being here, though, is in our fairy tales, our mythologies, we had somebody come up with a wonderful show called Pinocchio. And every time Pinocchio
with a big nose.
Yes, and every time he lied or he became like Seth, his nose grew like Seth, because Seth is the one with the big long nose. So Pinocchio is basically a code or a cipher for Seth. And of course, the word Pinocchio is just it's really a sentence. Pi, no key. In other words, they don't have the key. They don't have the real key to the system. And therefore, you'll see that they're always lying and their noses are growing and things of this nature because they don't have the key being pi. And quite frankly, Jewish metaphysics, they deny it. Even though it's so patently obvious to us in the West that pi is the great key, Jews actually, they will give it a little bit of lip service, but they'll basically deny it. They'll go off into all these tangents about this and that. And, Noah told us this. And all of this is basically crap, quite frankly. It's not based on it.
When was Pinocchio invented then? They refer to Pinocchio.
Yeah, Pinocchio. I don't know. It's basically recent. Superman is recent. A lot of these Marvel type comic book stuff were actually encoding some of the esoteric significances of Western Freemasonry.
I think Superman was invented in 1938 by a Canadian American teenager.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised.
Wow. Yeah, so it's who names everything then? Is that God or who names?
Well, that's
everything?
what they say. That's these legislators. Those are the people that are skilled in the naming of names. There is an actual craft. There's an actual priestcraft dedicated to the naming of names. It wasn't like, they were just named out of nowhere. The Bible makes it very childish and simplistic. God brought everything to Adam and Adam named everything. Okay? But
it's the priestly caste that
yes, there had to have been a priestly caste basically designed to naming names. They're talking about it in Cratylus. There was another one, if you read the extended work of Pericles, I think his name is Pericles. I'm trying to think who that 16th century guy was.
He was an ancient.
Not Pericles. The guy.
That one.
No, the guy from Parmith. I forget the guy's name from the 1600s. Parmenius or Parthenius. I think Parthenius. I forget the guy's name, but nonetheless, I read his extended work and I came across a very obscure passage there where he was saying, those of you responsible for the naming of names, always be sure to take care to ensure the essence of what is in that thing. So there was clearly some type of school even back in the 1600s that was dedicated to this. The Greeks are saying there was some people dedicated to this. So it's not like this happened randomly for the most part. Things in the initial phase were set down by people very skilled in this craft. And that's part of what the Hermetic Qaballa is about, is unsealing this information.
Does that mean everything has to be named in a sense?
Yeah, because everything has to have a name.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the word nouns. If we take the word nouns, N-O-U-N-S, right? And we take the S and we skip it to the other side, and then we take the N and we skip it to the other side. You now have a word that reads S-O-U-N-N. And once you realize that the N's and the D's can be placed back together again, in other words, they can be transposed. Nouns are sounds, and sounds are things that can actually make a sound. Typically, things have an ability to vibrate. Wind can vibrate against it, and therefore they are able to make sounds, and they are nouns.
That makes sense. It reminds me of a quote by Tesla. He said, you should think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency, and that's how you should view the world.
Pretty much. That would probably be a very true statement. I can't argue with him for sure.
So I see your chart there behind you for the benefit of our Reverence Radio listeners.
Yes, well, again, that is the Garden of Eden. I've never really spoken about how the Garden of Eden works, simply because it's not something I felt I should be doing, because without being able to control the final degree of how it goes out, it'll be stolen, and people will try to make it their own. People have already tried. Took a lot of my work and written books about what I've done, and so I've thought, okay, tired of giving away things for free, so I'm just not going to do any more work. So I stopped the work on the Isisian codes probably back 2011, 2012, not too long after we started Inside the Eye Live.
Okay, I see. So are you holding things back that you can't reveal to us?
Well, I'm not, sort of. There's certain things I kind of keep here. But we do have a few things we certainly can share. One of these ideas is the circle of the sun. Once you understand that this is a crafted series of language, it's crafted images, we have something that's called the magic square of the sun. And what it is, it goes back into ancient times. I'm not sure which mathematicians have done this, but they've done this for Venus, for the moon, for Earth, and they did it for the sun. And the sun has always had a value of 666. And when you create the magic matrix of the sun, you put basically the first 36 numbers, because the sum of 1 to 36 is 666. And this is one of the great key secrets to the Freemasonic Western system. It's got a very rational underpinning to it. One of those is that it's the sun. When we look at things like, how do I word this thing? Well, let's take us back to something called an achromatic cipher. And an achromatic cipher is talked about by Manly P. Hall in his book, Secret Teachings of All Ages. And what he was saying there is that, by the way, I think we're coming up on a break.
Back with the Fetch. We're talking about the Isisian codes and the Hermetic Qaballa. So welcome back, Dennis.
All right, Brian, thanks for having me back.
Very good. What's this illustration have on the video now?
Well, basically, as we're going into the break, we're talking about something called the achromatic cipher. It's very key to understanding or deciphering some of the code words within mythology, or some of the words within mythology as they've been crafted. And of course, not every word is crafted, but certainly there are signposts as you go along the way. And one of those is one of the ways you determine it is called the achromatic cipher. And the achromatic cipher is essentially, it's a tale that keeps its esoteric value from language to language. So if you tell it in English, or you tell it in Hebrew, or you tell it in Arabic, it wouldn't matter, because the real secret is within the tale itself. And oftentimes it has a mathematical or numerical or symbol attached to it to give you some ideas of achromatic ciphers. One of those comes from the tale of on Isis and Osiris. And this is what we call Kabbalistic treatises, are generally these treatises that give us some clue into how the construct was actually crafted and put together into what is now termed reality. That is what we mean by a Kabbalistic document. The on Isis and Osiris by Plutarch. I feel like I'm getting dry here from all the lights. I look good, but I'm starting to get all dried up here.
You're in your studio lights. That's right.
Yeah. So
green screen.
But on Isis and Osiris, you have a tale that talks about how Jehovah Typhon, or Seth, Typhon, was not born in the manner of normal people. He burst out through the side of his mother. This is nothing more than a code for the god of war, which is the astrological symbol of Mars. They're talking.
They have the same idea in Buddhism. They say that the Buddha came out of the sun of his mother, although this is not true. I mean, they say he was born the usual way, but the mythological idea is born out of the side of the mother. But I think that the idea behind that is he didn't come through the lower chakras because he's so high. Based on I wonder if that's a common idea in the ancient world, being born out of the side of your mother.
Well, in this case, he's known as the god of war. Okay, he's already called the god of war. Well, what is the god of war but Mars? Okay, so Mars. And he is linked in the mythological trail to Jesus. But people don't know how that is. But you know how that was? Because because Mars is the astrological symbol of Typhon. Okay, Typhon is Mars. So you have the circle with the arrow coming out. That's bursting through the side of the mother. Jesus is linked to this father, which is Jehovah Typhon Seth, because he is pierced in his side and blood and wine came out, or something like that. Blood or water came out. Correct?
I think that's when the Roman soldier pierced his side.
But that is the symbol for Venus. Hence you have the much reverence within Christianity to the mother, the goddess, Mary, etc. In my house, the girls, they have stuff to this all over the place, okay? So there you've got Venus and Mars linking here. Another one is kind of like a placement code, like in the tale of on the letter E at Delphi, where they say if, the letter E is the fifth letter. Hello, the fifth letter. And it means the conjunction if, which is what? F-I-F, fifth. They're telling you straight up, if, fifth, it's all if. At the number 5, they're telling you, and then that letter E becomes a scale. It becomes the scale of Ma'at, where it's turned on its side, and these are the scales, and they will go up and down as things are weighed. So that if weighs things, if this, then this, it starts to weigh cause and effect type of thing. It's weighing things. If is a type of weight or a measure type of thing. Another one that is very important to the Western esoteric traditions is that of Genesis 3:14, which is pi. And it's basically talks about the serpent. It says, cursed are you, because you have done this, unto your belly you shall go, and all the days dust you shall eat all the days of your life. Well, that again is a code. It's a achromatic cipher to tell you how to begin to decipher some of the coding that goes into the crafting of what we have termed reality today. Now, if you look at the 111, now in each of these, the sum of 1 to 36, everybody, is 666. The sum of 1 to 36 is 666. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 out to 36 is 666. However, in the magic matrix of the sun, the horizontal lines, the vertical lines, and the diagonal lines all equal 111. Well, again, once you understand the achromatic system, cursed are you, onto your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. Well, what they're talking about here is simply this: the dice. They're talking about the dice.
The dice. Okay.
If you have ones showing, then you go down to the belly and you should use the sixes. This was actually also included in King Henry IV and Shakespeare. So some of Shakespeare is a Kabbalistic treatise equally. So we know that once we see the ones showing, we go to the belly of the serpent and we use the sixes. And that is so darned important, because it's from here that we are now able to begin deciphering the great arch of the Freemasons, the Grand Arch, which is the 25,920 years of Plato, or the Platonic cycle, or what is termed the wobble of the earth on its axis, which is a period of 25,920 years.
Is that the amount of time goes around the galaxy? To go around
Not
the
around the
once?
galaxy. It's the amount of times, because when you spin a top, you take the top and you spin it. You'll notice it wobbles. It's never a perfect spin. It's always going to have a centrifugal wobble. Well, the Earth has its own wobble through space, as it's termed, okay? So that wobble is a period of 25,920 years. That wobble is known as the Grand Arch of the Freemasons. And it is from this Grand Arch that they have crafted a whole series of words to encode their philosophy, and at the same time they encoded it into the English alphabet. And that's a very critical thing now, because when we start to look at the English alphabet, within this alphabet are these mathematical truths based on astronomical calculations from which you cannot digress from truth. For instance, when I take the word Venus, the synodic orbit of Venus is 225 days. That's an astronomical observation. However, when I look at V as Victor, it's the 22nd letter of the alphabet. When I look at E, it is the 5th letter of the alphabet. And when I look at the word Nus, it's just sun backwards. Again, we have to use our two-headed eagle. So therefore, VE is 225 and NUS is sun. And the synodic orbit of Venus is 225 days. So is this a crafted word, or was it just randomly named out there? Chances are it was crafted to encode the esoteric significance, and it's not really esoteric. It is kind of esoteric.
It's complicated, but that makes sense. I can understand that.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's not, in other words, Venus is very important to their philosophy. So therefore it's encoded 225 days. Earth has a value of 52. How many weeks are in a year? 52.
Oh, yeah. 52.
Moon, the synodic orbit of Moon is 27.3 days. Divide it by 2 to get your pi proportion is 13.65. If you go back to the Isisian codes, which I believe is this slide here. Is it this slide or this slide? I should have written what these things are. Not this one. That's 7 up. I believe it's this one. Hang tight here, Brian.
Wasn't it the one with the circles in it?
No, this is
the number 0 horizon.
Here. So if I take the Isisian codes, if I look at the letter M here, we see it's 13. And if I look at the O, it is a 6. And if I look at the N, it's a 5. Well, 13.65 times 2 basically becomes your 27.3 days. That then becomes the synodic orbit of the moon. Sun has a value of 3, which is S at 3. N is at 5. So we know that the sum of 1 to 6 is 21, which is now the letter U. Hence the word sun is nothing but a code for 365. These types of words are being encoded into the language to hide this idea of and of course it all will lead up into the Grand Arch eventually. And the one word that they use here is the word life. And life,
you're going to explain the Grand Arch?
Well, the Grand Arch is the 25,920 years of the.
Oh yeah.
That's the Grand Arch, and it is basically it's basically everything in the factor of 1s and 6s. Everything in the Western system breaks down into a series of 1s or 6s. I call it their favorite number, wherein F and V is located at the letter 6. The favorite number is 6. Because if you break down 25,920 years into a series or a pi, like into 12 segments for the astrological symbols, which is 12, each symbol is 2,160 years. 2,160 years is 6 times 6 times 6 times 10.
Is that like going from Pisces to Aquarius?
Yes, from Pisces to Aquarius. That's correct, 2,160 years. The diameter of the moon is 2,160 miles.
Ah.
So it's 6 times 6 times 6 times 10. The distance of the sun is 6 times 6 times 6 times 10 times 4. Or not the diameter. Yeah, the diameter of the sun is 6 times 6 times 6 times 10 times 4, something like that, or times 1,000. Something like that. So everything breaks down into a series of 6s. And I think Karl Monk, he wrote a book about how this really breaks down. And he called it the Code. I think he just called it the Code, where a lot of the different ancient religions were encoding these various factors of 6s. The Mayans, if you look into their numerical systems, they're doing it a different way. They're not doing it. But like the ancient Indians, the Vedas are using a series of 6s. Our Western systems use a series of 6s. So it's all based on this 6 times 6 times 6. So when I look at the letters, the ace, the jack, and the king of the dice, this is an A, a J, and a K. That's the ace, the jack, and the king. Well, if it's 11011, because ace is 1, a jack is 10, and a king is the 11th letter of the alphabet. Well, guess what? That's 11011. Well, the short of it is, if you have ones showing, go to the belly and use the 6s. But it's not as if it's just chosen that way. It's not, because it's based on a series of mathematical summations. Because 1 plus 2 is 3. That's B. It's made by using a 1 and a 3. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 10. We're using a 1 and a 0 to create the glyph called the 10. Carry it out. 1 plus 2 up to 10 is J. That's 55. So therefore 55 plus 11 is 66. And that's the K letter, or the 11th letter of the alphabet. So we have again this one. The sum of 1 to 11 is 66. When we see that, go to the belly. So the ace, the jack, and the king, or the AJK, is, once again, 11011. The multiple of 6 times 6 times 10 times 6 times 6 is 12,960 years. Return that back to a word. L is the 12th letter. I is the 9th letter. F is the 6th letter. E has a very special right to remain silent, because 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 is the 0 number, or 15. So that's the circle of life. So even life has a value to it. It has an esoteric symbol to it. It's not just randomly chosen. So that's some of just what's encoded within the Hermetic Qaballa.
Yeah, I'm looking at the illustration behind you that helps with the numbers underneath the letters.
Well, and this was done, I think, in 2002, man. Something like that. When I first made this thing. This was very old now. I think this goes back to 2002, but that is your circle of life, and when we start looking at words, it starts to grant us the ability to now become a little bit philosophical. We can philosophize about certain letters. What really does this letter mean? What does that letter mean? Now we know that the letter B is so simple and obvious. It's the profile of a pregnant woman. Only she can be 2 and 3 at the same time, because 1 plus 2 is 3. Only she can be 2 and 3 at the same time. So therefore, when we look at the bottom, they always told us in school, make the bottom bigger than the top, and they never told us why. But if you recall, they always told you that, right? Make the bottom bigger than the top.
In the B, yeah.
Yeah, they always said make the bottom bigger than the top, but they didn't say why. Me, I spend half my time asking why. Why do you want me to make the bottom bigger than the top? Why do you want me to make this letter this way? Why do you want why? So in many cases, this is a treatise into why. Why are things the way they are? Why?
That's the question.
Yeah, I enjoyed The Matrix Reloaded because, the only answer is to understand why. Why? Why itself is a letter. It's the 25th letter of the alphabet. So why?
Yeah, right.
Right? Why? So why is why the 5th? I mean, I get it. I understand why is why. But who else does?
So why is why?
Numbers in the Illuminati system are used correlationally. Okay? Correlationally. And the best way to understand how that is to understand very simple algebra, or basically algebra. If I tell you 1 plus 0 equals X, what's your answer?
1 plus 0 equals X. I would say 1 is X.
So you would say 1 is X. And of course, many in the audience would probably say the same thing. But I'm going to tell you the answer is true. Now, the answer is true. Now, how do you now decipher what I just said?
Yeah, true. What do you mean true? Yeah. 1 plus X equals true.
No, 1 plus 0 equals X.
Yeah.
Because when we write the letters, certain letters also have numerical value. A letter I, and a 1 become indistinguishable if alone. If I just put that 1 there, you don't know if I'm putting I or 1. Unless I put some other glyph part to it. If I just put a 1, but if I don't put any type of serif to it, you don't know whether I'm putting a 1 or an I.
What about an L?
An L is easier to see because it's clear. L is an L. But an I doubles up as a number. A 0 doubles up as a letter. So some letters like I, 1 and 0, they double up. Right? Now you're right. If it's a lowercase l, it can sometimes appear as a 1. I agree with that. But the point here is when I do 1 plus 0, you're not going to know that's an L either, right? But it's 1 plus 0 and it's true. And the reason why is because I is located at 9. O is located at 15, and 9 plus 15 is 24, and that equals X. So therefore, the formula is true. 1 or I plus O equals X. That's a true statement.
Okay.
Now, this is where we start to talk about numbers being used correlationally. Correlationally. And it seems like a stretch. It seems like a stretch. However, we know what they're encoding is some of the Freemasonic systems are encoding the great work, this idea of pi, the Pythagorean theorem, 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. And we know that in the word y is 5 squared. Now, another thing that the Illuminati system uses is a series of formulas where they will hide 1/3, 1/2, 1/4 of the formula. For instance, when I take the word sun, S-U-N, if you have the code system I showed you, you know that S is 3, N is 5, and all you have to do is sum from 1 to 6 to get to 21, which is you. So I gave you the first word number and the third. I didn't give you clear the second number to form 365. You had to use logic and reason to calculate it. That's how the system works. So if I took the moon, for instance, 27.3, I had to use logic and reason to return it back to its 13.65. Now, when I look at a word like Y, and I know they're encoding the 3, 4, 5 triangle. I know that's what they're doing. That makes it easy once you have the key to the code. Because Y is a letter and it's 25. Well, okay, that's the side of the triangle. That's part of the formula. 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. Y is 5 squared.
Yep.
Y is 5 squared. It's 25. W is the 23rd letter of the alphabet. If I spin it backwards, 3 squared instead of 23, I get my 9.
Wow.
H.
Sounds like you're lucky.
Yeah, H is the 8th letter of the alphabet, which is comprised of 2 4s. 4 squared is 16. So therefore, WHY is 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared, using numbers correlationally.
That's your 9 plus 16 equals 25. 3 squared plus 4 squared.
Yes,
equals 5
exactly,
squared.
and 25. So that is the Pythagorean theorem. And then from there, there's a whole bunch of additional philosophies encoding further into that. And part of what Hermetic Qaballa does is starts to decipher all of this information. And the more information we get, in theory, the more rooted we are into some type of reality, because words start to take on much deeper esoteric significances for us than to the quote unquote the lay person who doesn't have any idea what they're talking about when they talk or use when they are talking about or using a word, because they just don't understand the foundation of that particular word.
Yeah. So does that control your sense of reality? The choice of words is part of your whole perception.
Well, of course
of
it does. Of course it does.
Yeah.
And the language starts to program people into believing their realities. The mythologies shape their life. The reality, the mythologies shape their vision of their world. And
so do you think the Jewish establishment is using this knowledge to condition our reality, to condition it the way they want against us?
Yes, of course. Of course they are. I mean, and they've done it to the point now where it's almost idiotic, but people are just so lazy and lacking in any type of esoteric background to where that they fall prey to it. I mean, everybody's a not see. I mean, give me a break already. No, we see very clearly. What do you mean I don't see?
Yeah, I guess people aren't paying attention to this.
Yes, they're not paying attention. And the old mythology state or the Masonic Freemasonry believed that when this information, when this light is removed from the planet, that's when tyranny comes back, because that's when we start to get much more delusional people who will be just swept and swayed away from whatever they're told. They don't have the logic. They don't have the reason to actually think things through. They don't have a foundation.
Maintain our reason, our logic, our civilization.
Yeah, you need a foundation upon which to anchor yourself. Otherwise, the winds will blow you everywhere. And the problem we have is that whether it was Christianity serving as an anchor or this esoteric concept serving as an anchor for our Western elites that created and crafted Western civilization, these anchors have been broken apart. They've been torn asunder. And that's one of the big problems we have. We don't even have an elite now that has an anchor in its own qualified esoteric system. They've all basically given up and they follow Talmud and Jewish Kabbalah. They aren't rooted in their own anchor anymore. And that's why we have the problems we have from our elites. They are no longer spiritually attuned to the anchors upon which this civilization was crafted, which is this information.
I guess the question comes up, who did it? Who crafted it, you know?
Well, that remains the great mystery. Nobody really knows that. Obviously, there was a lot of people working on it through the centuries. You know, people say, Dennis, you guys can't do that. You know, it's not, that's a big that's a big conspiracy, you know? And I'm like, guys, it's not as big as you think. Because at the active peak of Freemasonry, we had over 5 million people. So if you had less than 2% of the people that understood this, you still had a body of men of 20, 25,000 strong who could work to craft the language, build it into curriculum, build it into the grammar, build it into the mythologies, build it into the children's tales. You had 20,000 people that you could work with as a body. And of course, they're all sworn to secrecy to craft it all. And no one's going to tell you.
Done this. They've already done this, you're saying.
Yeah, they've already done it. It's done. I mean, the work's been put down. Yeah. So, and no one's going to admit to you. Now, I have spoken with Freemasons here in the Middle East and elsewhere, and I've shared with them what I've theorized, and they said, you know, we've actually in the 1940s, you know, we had Freemasons come here, you know, 40s, 50s, and 60s. A lot of Freemasons from America would come to Jordan. They would teach this type of stuff to us. So okay, well, if that's what they're telling me here, and say, wow, but nobody ever could. Yeah, they're saying, but nobody could ever teach it like you. And I've been on airplanes. Yeah. I've talked about this on aircraft, and come to find out the seats in front of me were Freemasons. And 45 minutes into the trip, they turned around and they just kind of winked and they said, we call that the 7th definition of a word. They're not denying it. They're just saying, yes, what you're discussing. You know, he said, yes, we believe that everything has what we call a 7th definition, and the 7th definition is the secret one. And that's what you're talking about.
Wow. I wonder if you can give us an example of that.
Well, like sun. You know, when I give you the mathematical number to sun, that's like a definition. When I look at words like pretty, okay, pretty. Now, once we've broken down the alphabet and the phonetics, we can start to break down the words. So if I look at the P, we know that P's are male. We know that R's are female. We know that B's are female. We know that O's are female. We know that D's are males. We know that F's have its value. I don't know all of them, quite frankly. Some of them would be considered hermaphrodite. You know, they kind of have essences of both. We know that I's are male, for sure. And I know some are what they are. I can assure you for a fact, A is male, B is female, C is male, D is male. E, it's kind of like a symbol for balance. F, not so sure, but probably female. G, I'm not so sure. H, I'm not so sure. I is male. Okay. O is female. X's are both male and female. Y is like a child, but it's male and female. So these things, we can start to break things down, but the most common and obvious are P's and R's. P's and R's are common. So P is male, R is female. So when I look at a word like paint, P and A, P-A, we can start to P-A-N-T. Maybe they're talking about T, because if you think of paint, it's this palette of all these various colors. So P and A would be the male and the female, and the palette is Earth itself, because T is the planet. T has its own value. It goes up and it goes down, it goes up and it goes down, because it's a measure of noon zenith at the noon equinox, at the noon zenith. So its epic points are the winter solstice and the summer solstice. But if I look at it from the sun being above the T, this is known as the Ankh. That's the Ankh. The Ankh is like giving birth.
So you're saying the time of day matters then?
Yes, of course. All the marking points matter. When you have a directional change, that's what matters. That's the key here. So morning would go up, and then at noon, you're going to have a directional change, and it's going to then start coming back down. That's a key point. That
means they do things at a particular time. It's better, more powerful.
Well, I guess I'm not a magician. Perhaps they do. I can't comment on that. Maybe.
I'm just thinking. I read there's some astrological meaning. President Kennedy was killed at 12:30 in the afternoon, and Bob Kennedy was shot at 12:30 in the morning.
Well, no doubt. No doubt that they do that stuff. No doubt that these people who do that stuff. No doubt about it. They're into this stuff. They understand it. So it's not like it's random. Like 9/11 wasn't random.
No?
And you know what I mean? In fact, if you go here back to the Garden of Eden, okay, just to give you an idea of 9/11. If you go back to the Garden of Eden, what you're going to notice here, here's an X.
At the top left?
Yes. Here's the X going through Gemini. And then there's your I, which is now your 8. This is your 9. On the other side, we have another X, and there is our, you're not actually capturing my mouse. But if you notice, there's an IXXI here. That's 9/11. That 9/11 sequence is really the Garden of Eden. If you are cast out of the Garden of Eden, then you get the word called an emergency, because you're in danger now. You're no longer safe within the Garden of Eden. It's an emergency. But you can't have an emergency until what? You emerge from the Garden of Eden. So the words are telling us a little bit about this esoteric concept between the Garden of Eden and the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, emerge and see. I never thought of that.
Exactly. Emergency. You have to emerge. And then it becomes an emergency, the C being an occultation equally. So these types of philosophies start to get built into the language to remind us of the mythology. We have the key players, Jehovah, Typhon, Seth, Osiris, Isis. We have the key story, which is the deluge, where mankind is drowned. This is important because the big number in Freemasonry is what? 32. Because at 32, it becomes what? Ice freezes.
33rd degree?
Ice freezes at 32.
Okay, yeah.
So once ice freezes, what does it do? It rises above the water. It's no longer submerged within the oceans. You cannot create the word seas without understanding that the sea is like the ocean itself, which occults everything that lies below it.
It sounds like sea.
And then if you're seized, that means it's like being inside of the ocean. You cannot escape the ocean. You must have somebody come and rescue you. You must.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
There's no way out. So you have been seized. So the philosophies then get built into the language, and we can start to develop this very rich philosophical system inside the language, and then craft an alternate reality right within the noses of everybody that's watching and listening. They don't even know what we're really saying, how we've crafted the language, how we've used this letter to spin over it to the left or to the right to just change the entire dynamic of the word, and nobody will get it. We just tell you what it means, but it's like not really entirely what we're telling. And then that gets into the Freemasonic idea of a seventh definition. And the truth of the matter is, Brian, is we have always been at war with ignorance on this planet. Always. We've seen it in the church, in the Vatican, back in the darkest period of Europe during the Inquisition period. We have seen it all over with the communists in China, with the communists in Russia. We've been fighting ignorance forever, basically. So therefore,
that was a war against the Jews, like with communists.
Well, this is not even that. The Jewish people are like the progenitors of stupidity, what we call ignorance, because they believe they know everything. They believe it. They think they got it, but they don't have it. Their donkey, which they worship, is our don't key. We don't follow this. Do not key. The donkey is the do not key. They don't have it. Pinocchio is pie, but no key. They don't have it. And every time they talk, the nose just gets longer because it's clear they don't have it. And they create these worlds of ignorance where today in the political world, we can't even speak without what? Being called a Nazi. Oh, you're an anti-Semite. Well, what are we? Or a white supremacist. What have they done? They've created this world of narrative. It's a complete delusional world. So we generally have to hide our information subsurface, and hopefully when we have enough people that are wise and get it, to resurface all this information, but not in a negative way. See, everybody wants to take this information and say it's all negative. Well, what do you have today? You can't even go outside without worrying about some Antifa thug making problems for you, or somebody reporting you to Twitter. It's so bad, and it's the most.
I guess what's good about it, it wakes you up when you see the world. It causes you to wake up.
Correct.
If you didn't know.
That is correct. That's the whole point, is to start waking up, and then how you take it from there. That's your journey, not mine. And that's the key thing about the Western system, is it's not about us telling you how you should develop and go. Your spiritual journey is yours, and you should celebrate it. But we can't celebrate it if everybody is living in this delusion. Imagine, Brian, they have just flooded millions of these African migrants into Europe, into a land where we had some of the most amazing esoteric knowledge encoded into stone in all of these various Gothic cathedrals spread all over Europe. I mean, if you read about Gothic architecture, every little minutia of those buildings meant something. This means this. They had whole books about what that particular style meant. So when you went and looked at a Gothic building and you understood the architecture, you could understand the story they were telling you, because the craftsman had a meaning for every little piece of stone.
That's great, eh?
Now, how do we take this type of mentality, where even the fine minutia of stone created an esoteric reality, and how do we go to a sub-Saharan African today and talk reasonably to them? It is the most criminal thing to impose upon a people a direction for which that they did not ask to go. Look, the Germans never asked to go in this direction that's been forced on them.
Yeah,
Neither did the Russians. Neither did the Russians. Neither did the French. So all of these nations, all of these people have been denied their right to self-determination, to become their own unique creation under the sun.
Point.
This is a great crime, and for me, those responsible should be literally held responsible to the fullest extent of the universe here. Because this is
internationalist Jews. It's their karma. I guess they will be feeling their karma certainly after they die.
Well, they don't see. That's the thing that people
not
don't.
So good for us, so
for people don't
now.
get this about the Jewish people as an esoteric system. They
atheists.
don't believe in They don't believe in an afterlife like we do. They don't care.
That's why they're so ruthless.
That's why they're so ruthless. It's all about what can I get today, and it doesn't matter whom I hurt along the way. Because my journey is once. They don't have an idea of reincarnation. They don't understand the idea of be right back, BRB, this reincarnating wheel, this idea where the soul has to develop. So they think that whatever it takes for this life, if they need to destroy and screw that guy over there because, hey, he didn't understand the legalities of it and I took advantage of him the whole time, that's okay because I'm a Jew. And that's wrong, of course. But they just don't care. It's a shame
they don't know the truth about karma and rebirth, and it would curb their actions because they'd be saving themselves from a lot of suffering.
Well, they don't. Again, that's not. They don't care, and that's not helping us one bit, is it?
No.
Okay, so basically, this philosophy aids them. It doesn't aid us. Relative to them, relative to them, it doesn't help us a bit. It aids them entirely.
No.
So be
detrimental both.
Yeah, so be careful. Be careful about the philosophies equally. You never know. Maybe some philosophers are meant to disarm you.
Yeah, like communism, gun control.
So
turn the other cheek.
Yeah, I have another story here I could share with you. One is it's called MI5, and of course we've heard a lot about MI5. And what that is British intelligence. And there's another concept called 7-Up. And I'm sure everybody's heard of 7-Up.
National 7-Up too, yeah.
Yeah, 7-Up. because what happens in this esoteric system is Jehovah, Typhon, and Seth is known as also the lime or the lemon. The one, the lemon. He's always also Lemon is the one. But he's really not the one because he's the 9, which is the one. The real one is the A, the letter A, which is the true one. But it's like gone. It's like on this planet, the hex A gone. That point is gone. It's like it's been removed. This light's been removed. So we have
gone.
Yeah, hex A gone and pent A gone. It's the A is missing. So what happens here is that inside this system here, the 7 up, Jehovah, Typhon, Seth is considered the lemon. So there was an old tale about, not tale, but it was a song by the Kingston Trio. And he talked about my father said to me, come learn a lesson from the lovely lemon tree. My son is most delightful or something. The lemon tree, the fruit is lovely, the smell is lovely, but nobody can eat from the lemon tree. And the point here is that Jewish systems, they have within them a beauty to it, to the human spirit. There's something about it that people like, but unless you give it some sugar, unless you give it a little bit of sweetener, nobody can really taste pure Judaism. Pure Judaism, quite frankly, is pure evil. I mean, if you look at...
I think of it as an international criminal syndicate.
Well, no, even spiritually, it's pure evil. And
like Satanism.
Well, it's worse. In many respects, I think it's even worse. I mean, look, somebody once said to me, Dennis, look, if we all lived under a Jewish world today and we followed their legal commandments, we'd be stoning everybody. We'd be putting people to death for everything. So the truth of the matter is the world has rejected Jewish legal systems from time immemorial because they're insanely brutish. They're insanely sadistic. And so when you see Muslims stoning people today, they're just following the Jewish way. They haven't grown out of the Jewish way. Even Jews themselves are too afraid to follow their own systems. I'm all saying, look, this is your book. That's an adulterer. All of you stone that person now. Like Jesus said, all right, come on, start casting the stones. Because you guys are cowards. You want to tell us what to do all the time, but you never want to follow your own rules. That's the Jewish way. That's what's come out of Judaism.
That's elitism too, supremacy.
Well, it's not just that. It's like, guys, you got your legal code. Follow it. It's your code, not ours. Ours was the 42 negative admonitions of Ma'at. I did not do this. I did not do that. I did not spy on you. I did not harm people. I did not kill somebody. I did not do this. That was the ancient system before Jews rose to power. The 42 negative affirmations of Ma'at. So, okay, fine. The point here is 7-Up is typically a symbol of the Jewish God. The lime, it's crystal clear, okay? But it's got the lemon flavor, and it's kind of symbolic.
How is that the Jewish God then?
Because he's always equated to as the lemon. He's equated to as things that are.
Red lemon,
he's equated to things that are bitter that you cannot eat without modifying to sweeten it. So, 7-Up is a symbol of that. Now, when we look at the MI5, British intelligence, what you're going to notice is that there's 9 dots on the left, 9 dots on the right. But if you look going up, there's 7 up. That's right. There's 7 up. And if you notice, they're little round dots. And when they made the 7-Up logo, they made that dot between the 7 and the up, the round like dot. And of course, these dots here. But each of those dots are actually the crown jewels. And the crown jewels are the alphabet itself.
Wow.
So when we look at those 9 dots, it's the A to Y on the left side, the Q to Y on the other side, and then we start to count up from the Isisian code system. And you have J, K, L, M, N. The 6.0 is ciphered with the crown with the cross. Well, the crown, the O with the cross going through it like that is the symbol of Venus.
Okay.
That's the symbol of Venus, so we know that's the O because it's feminine. The seventh dot is in the eye of the pyramid, so that's a P, and I. It is pi that is in the dot of the pyramid. So below the pyramid, you have what's called E, the 2, which is also the Greek letter pi and R. You go down to the lower left-hand quarter, you put the M in front behind the E, that's EM, then pi, the V being 5, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 5, which is E. So that's empire. And UK is the sum of 1 to 6, and KK is 11, so it says 666. Oh. And that's the code within British intelligence.
I was reading how MI5 was started by John Dee around the year 1600 under Queen Elizabeth I. You have these extraordinary higher powers. He fought off the whole Spanish Armada. Was to invade England.
Yeah, that was the rumor. And of course, his
they did it 3 times.
His call sign was the owl, and his call sign was 007, equally. So yes, he's kind of a storied character here. He's part of the early rise of the stenographers, the encoders, the crown mathematicians who are responsible really throughout all of England. And there's so much work that's been done in steganography and codes in Western books that to this day, nobody's really broken the code of what these books even mean. Now that we've got a lot of machine codes, computers that can start to work on this stuff, they're starting to break some of these works down. I think
it just must be rare in this. Probably not many people like you who devoted so much time to this.
No, there are. It's just that they're not necessarily good people, you know. And what's funny is I had a guy that worked in Hollywood. You know, he's part of the Screen Actors. Let's just say he still is. He's still a dues paying member, but he was part of the establishment.
Yeah.
And he made the comment after reading my work. He said, "Hey," he said, "what's this thing with pi? Are you guys putting pi everywhere?" And he said, "Yeah, we try to put pi everywhere we work." So they're trying to encode this type of information everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Literally everywhere, and they fuse it to this. I forget, but like the Matrix Reloaded was basically released on a pi number. For instance, the keymaker says, well, there's exactly 314 seconds. The Matrix Reloaded was released on 5/15, but if we
okay,
I forget how the number, I did the calculation so many years ago, but it worked out to pi. So you'll find pi everywhere.
Wow, real synchronicity in your life, eh? With this.
Yeah, and I saw a movie the other day, and the guy says, yeah, something like 6, and then the other guy says 6, and the next guy says 6. So they're encoding 666 into the code, and some of it is linked to a lot of evil. I'm not gonna argue that. I'm not gonna deny that. But there's also a lot of good and truth in what we're saying. I guess
it just depends on a person's intention is using these powers. Right?
Exactly. I mean, the point here is that our language has with it a really unique, beautiful story about life, about the beauty and sanctity of life. When we look at thank you, we know that the Q is symbolic of the fertilized egg, with the O, and then the spermatozoa is
thank
just
you. You mean
the Q? Yes.
And thank you.
The thank you.
Thank you.
You cannot say thank without saying Q.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You cannot. So the greatest salutation out there is not thank God, but thank you. People will say thank yous everywhere you go. They won't say thank God. They'll say thank you. So it's one of the greatest salutations we've ever created. It celebrates life each and every time we say it. Each and every time someone says it out there in the world, we are reminded. Trash is getting picked up outside there. But we are reminded of just the beauty of life equally, if we take time to remember it as so. Unfortunately, people don't do that, and that's the sad story. And of course, again, it's hard to get this information out when we live in a world that is basically under a deluge, which then becomes delusion. It's very difficult when people are deluded.
Yeah, that's the agenda, right? To keep us deluded, keep us dumbed down.
Yes.
Probably takes a lot of patience to study this, like we're saying, because of the complexity.
It is quite complex, for sure. You know,
Yeah,
I've kind of lost your video for some reason, but let's see if I can bring you back.
Oh.
There you are. So
Okay.
basically, guys, yes, you know, if you look at, you know, we got a little bit of time left. I'll share a little bit about this thing.
4 minutes, 5 minutes.
You know, behind me, what you have here is what we call paradise. Think about it, paradise. What's the Garden of Eden? The Garden of Eden is called paradise. But when you look at this matrix here, what do you see? You see two cubes, two paradise.
Yeah.
This is called paradise. This is the Garden of Eden. And the abyss is between the mind, represented Gemini. If I move out of the way here, Scorpio, which is raw emotion. So the abyss within the mind.
Which one's Gemini?
Gemini is your mental intellect. Scorpio is your emotion.
Which one is it though on there?
The two. The twins, the two. On the left. On my left.
Okay.
Maybe you're right, I'm not sure, but on the left. And then Scorpio is the abyss on the right. Now that gap between these two is known as the abyss. It is that gap between pure intellect and pure mind. Pure intellect, I should say, and pure emotion. And it's something that, of course, people always will have struggling with. At the top is Libra, the scales. And, of course, we're reminded always that we must balance these two out. We must balance the mind and the emotion. We must always be in harmony between the two. We can't be too predominant on one, too predominant on the other. If you'll notice also coming out of pi, we have a 13 and a 14, which is intricately linked to Ma'at. Ma'at being also a cipher for pi. Down below, which you cannot see, but it's Cancer, 69, and the digits coming into that, 0, 5, 6, 19, 18, and 21, add up to 69, which is Cancer. If you go down behind my back, it's Leo. The numbers that go into Leo form a total of 74. This is the sign of completion. This is where all the work is completed. That 74 then becomes July 4th. Which a lot of people know as 1776.
Wow. So who chose July 4th? Was it the Masons at a Masonic meeting?
Yes, and I'm pretty sure this is it because I've seen things about how they talk about July and how July used to be where the sun was in its epical zenith, you know, because the key points to these systems are the marking points when things start to change direction, where there's a rise and a fall, where that stopping point is. That's the key point that they're looking for, and that's what they start to encode, the key points. Like the Ankh is the T. Like if we use a T, what do we do when we golf? We use a T. The T raises the ball up. So a T is almost as if we are raising the sun up. If the sun is going to be given birth, it's coming through the vulva of the Ankh. But the T means to raise the sun up. But if we reverse the T and we make it upside down, that becomes a lowercase t, and a lowercase t has the exact shape of an anchor. So therefore, the Ankh and the anchor are the exact identical thing. They're talking about the same concept viewed from two different angles. The T on one side is the sun being raised up in the sky, where the anchor is as the sun as it's been dropped into the water, which is the atmosphere. So therefore, that's the anchor. So the Ankh and the anchor are identical phonetically. And as we said earlier when we started the show, there is a very clear link to the phonetics within this esoteric system. And that was made very clear by the Sepher Yetzira. The phonetics have very key points.
Anything we can summarize? The music's come on. This has been really good, Dennis.
Well, nice being here, Brian. I hope we enjoyed the show.
Yeah. So they can find you on InsideTheEyeLive.com and on Revolution Radio Saturdays and Tuesdays.
Thursdays.
I'm sorry, Saturdays and Thursdays. I really thank you for being on my show, the Fetch. Good for that. I really appreciate the knowledge. I have to play this again through. There's a lot to it, you know.
In a nutshell. Thanks so much, Brian. Been fun.
Okay. And I like to get bed. It's 3 in the morning now in Jordan. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, time to get some sleep. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Good night.
Delusion Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this.